So I always get some questions about Maicos and racing. Well, here's the story of Brad Lackey and Maico. Brad Lackey is a 1982 500cc world champion, just in case you didn't know. And we'll go over some of Brad's comments on Maico. I also have a few upcoming videos that I'm putting together if there's some interest in them. One is on Maicos and racing in general, where we'll take a look back at the history of Maico and racing. Some people still think Maico is a Chinese bike after all in my comments section. I have another video about Maicos in movies and TV shows. I've collected close to 15 different movies and shows that have Maicos in them. I mean, even Bill Cosby tried to have his way with a pair of Maicos back in the day. In the early 2000s, after Brad had retired, he got into vintage racing. And what bike did he choose? He chose a Maico 440, and he was still winning races. About the bike, Brad said, "It rides like a caddy, plenty of power, good power. The suspension is nice, and it goes where I point it. If I would have had a bike like this back then, I would have been world champion a whole lot earlier." There's a link to the article below. Brad's 1974 Maico 440 is currently on display at Jameson's Classic Motorcycle Museum in Pacific Grove, California. Believe it or not, Brad almost rode for Maico back in the early 80s. A bike was built, but it never worked out. Maico, after all, didn't have the deep pockets of other companies. However, I don't know the full details as to why this deal fell through. In another article, which I'll link below, Steve Staseski, the longtime mechanic of Brad Lackey and owner of Maico Meister, took out a 1981 Maico 490 to ride. This is quoted in the article. It was a good Maico with a 1983 reed cage on it, which was considered factory stuff back in 1981. Brad Lackey took the bike for a rather long ride and came back flabbergasted. He noted that the bike was faster, turned better, handled better, and had better suspension than his 2010 Suzuki 450 four-stroke. The only thing the four-stroke had better was superior brakes. Considering the fact that the 490 had more horsepower and was 20 pounds lighter than his Suzuki is no prize to us hardcore two-stroke bike enthusiasts. The last thing, before we wrap up, I want to introduce you to Ake Johnson. In 1972, Ake Johnson won all three motos at Saddleback Park of the final race of the 11-race Trans AMA Series. His overall victory at Saddleback marked an unprecedented 9 wins in a row. That's 9 in a row in the 11-race series. This feat has never been equaled in the entire Trans AMA history. He had a 400 Maico, and so this is all quotes from an article which I'll link at mixworksbike.com. I'll link that article as well. But 2 hand-built 400 Maico Radicals were specially built for Ake at the factory shop in Germany just for his 1972 Trans AMA. The bikes were built to Ake specs and were shipped over for the first race. After the third race event, Ake switched from one bike to the number 2 bike and raced the remaining 8 events on this very bike, winning every single race, not breaking down once. Starting at the beginning of the series, that would be a total of 32 motos without a single did not finish. I just bring this up because Brad is also mentioned in this article. So after the final race at Saddleback, it was sold, but while Ake was decimating the best riders in the world, including both 250 and 500 world champions in the Trans AMA series, rumor began to swirl regarding the Maico Ake was riding. Nobody believed it was stock, as Ake and the Maico factory had claimed. After all, Suzuki, Joel Roberts, and Roger DeCoster were competing on an incredibly trick super lightweight Works 370 Suzukis, and Yamaha was using their ultra proven fast Works YZ360 and the all new YZ500 ridden by Gary Jones. Kawasaki was also represented by Brad Lackey on the new Prototype 400. So how could a stock Maico compete with these bikes, let alone beat them in every single week after week? So the article goes on how they just lent them to the magazines, let the magazines tear the bikes apart, and figure out they were basically stock bikes. But and just on the side note here, Ike Johnson did win motocross designations on a Maico in 72 or 73. He should have won it both years, but one year he lost to Roger DeCoster just because he had a spark plug come out, unscrew itself out of the head. But otherwise, he would have won against Roger 2 times, not just once, at the motocross designations. So anyhow, that's a little background on some of the racing, and a little plug on how, Brad Lackey, world champion, does enjoy Maicos as well. So these bikes are definitely not Chinese bikes as people think.